If you ask them, why do you dance? They would say, because it's my culture. And when you ask them, what is your culture? They would answer, I am Khmer. And when you ask them, what is Khmer? They would have no answer. Simply put, the socio-economic and cultural environment was not conducive to nurturing artists that our tradition needed, exemplified most by a moment in which one of my 8-year-old students asked me, Bang Prom, what is your real job? So this is me with my students from the Khmer Arts Academy, and at that time we were traveling throughout the state of California and doing lecture demonstrations. And so here we are in the streets of San Francisco, and actually they're all my little sisters, but the one in the gold on the far right is my biological little sister. This is a work that combines Khmer classical dance and filmmaking, and you can see the use of the white body paint is actually inspired by dancers who, classical dancers who used to paint themselves completely white in Europe in more than 100 years ago. And so you can see this is like the coming together of traditions and disciplines and languages that reflected my early creative practice. This is a performance at the inauguration of Kasawabi, which was designed by the famous Japanese architect Tadao Ando. And if you look on the sand, the guy alone sitting on the sand, that's me. So I was, at that time, I was starting to travel internationally and perform and choreograph and collaborate with international artists. And this is me teaching 2 of my students in Phnom Penh, in my living room in Phnom Penh. And so the young man on the left is Chambran, and at the time of this photo, he had only been practicing training for 3 months. And then Butit on the right side in this photo had been training for 2 years, and you'll see both. Well, you saw Chambran in the very first video, but you'll see Butit after this. Realizing that I wasn't getting any younger, I traveled to Mexico, Chile, and Brazil in search of a new home to live and create as an artist. And just as I was getting ready to move to Mexico, I received an email saying that I had been awarded a fellowship to develop a new work in Cambodia. I thought I would finish the work, which revolved around gay love and protests, in 1 year, and go live my romantic life as an artist in Mexico City, but fate had different plans. After about a month and a half of teaching young gay men in the living room of my Phnom Penh apartment, this living room, young men who would never have access to a tradition considered a female art, and seeing their movements in synchronicity, I realized, wow, Cambodia's first gay dance company just formed in my living room. And I understood that if I wanted to serve this movement tradition nearly destroyed during the Khmerese genocide, if I wanted to serve LGBTQ people and Cambodia and humanity in my fullest capacity, I had to do it from Cambodia with love. It was a strange moment in which my dreams seemed to get bigger and fuller, yet they also somehow became sharper and more realistic. Perhaps this strangely contradictory yet harmonious stretching of awareness is the closest that I have been to experiencing an epiphany. And so, I have been based in Cambodia for the past 8 years, where due to a lack of human resources and financial resources as well, due to nascent post-conflict infrastructures and cultural systems, I have done the work of an entire organization or company all by myself. For my students, and the family and community that we have formed, I am all at once artist, teacher, researcher, costume designer, fundraiser, public relations guy, janitor, mentor, brother, and father. It has been a steep learning curve full of sacrifices and growth, in which I was forced to broaden my leadership and entrepreneurial capacities or die. At our lowest moment, I sold a gold necklace that my late father gifted me so that I could pay my dancers their monthly salaries. It was the only heirloom from him which I had, and I only felt the weight of my action when my friend, who was a fellow dancer, said with tears in her eyes, "Why didn't you come to us for help?" help instead. And to this day, I comfort myself by saying it was my father's way of taking care of me and my students and our tradition, and I console myself by saying it was worth it. So then, let's now take a look at the young men and the space to which my father and my friends in Cambodia and throughout the world have helped to hold and push forward. This is an image from our very first performance in Cambodia, which took place at the Department of Performing Arts in 2016. Doors opened an hour early and the audience was packed within 5 minutes. Even more, not a single person left before the Q&A finish. This particular image is from my first original work, Bamok Make Santia, meaning dance before a twilight sky, which uses traditional Khmer dance, music, and costuming to depict the love and marriage of two male gods. I actually began choreographing this dance in 2018, but have constantly come back to it. And as my heart, choreographic abilities, and capacity to love have matured, so has the dance and the lyrics. So let's watch an excerpt of the latest version in rehearsal. And you'll see Petit, he's the guy wearing the glasses that you saw in the photo earlier. taking after Ban Mok Mek Santier, in which the expression of LGBTQ love, joy, and desire are gestures of protest in a violent world, I have also created a series of short choreographies which set Khmer classical dance onto pop music from all over the world. The first is set to Sam Smith's Lay Me Down, the second is set to Paul Kim's Me After You, the third is set to a traditional Mahauri melody beloved in Cambodia, Thailand, and Laos, of which I worked with a composer to rearrange and write English lyrics for. Let's watch a rehearsal of Prum by Pop number 2, set to Paul Kim's Me After You. company has also worked with artists of various disciplines from all over the world, including Mong Joyce out in the audience there. This particular image is from Drops and Seeds, which was made in collaboration with Ensemble K&M Berlin. The work's title represents the falling of tears, rains, bullets, and bombs that have shaped the realities of Khmer life and psychology in a modern era, and thereby contemplate cycles of unspeakable violence, loss, and power conflicts. In this particular section, the dancers are tasked to begin with a slow contact improvisation while maintaining Khmer classical dance form, eventually de-stylizing the traditional aesthetic of serpentine curves into quick, mundane movement and intense wrestling. Let's look at a different section of the work, however, which was performed at the CTM Festival in Germany. Lately, my work has taken an environmentalist trajectory by bringing together art, ritual, mythology, and technology. This image features two of my students in costume for playing Spinjiba, a new classical dance drama inspired by the Japanese folktale Akoya Hime. Akoya Hime is the story of a young woman who falls in love with a tree spirit, the latter of whom asks her to fell his tree, in other words, kill him, so that the villagers may build a bridge during a time of communal strife. Although the tale was first introduced to me in one paragraph, I was so shaken and touched by the story of love, service, sacrifice, and offering that I wrote lyrics and arranged music for a 2-hour dance drama in just 1 week. The costumes are inspired by Khmer and Japanese Buddhist iconography and by the magnificent pine trees at Koyasan, a sacred mountain in Japan with hundreds of temples, many of which are more than 1,000 years old. Or perhaps a motive melody that has returned to Cambodia from Japan after more than 1,000 years, and it happened in my living room once again. So let's watch a very raw and very early rehearsal clip of The Deepest Blue. After drowning myself in the ocean, the dragon mother imbues my lifeless form with her power to save 2 young men trafficked on ocean waters. Taking possession of my body, she releases both rage and justice, demonstrating the power of nature. very raw. Prumsodun Ok NATYARASA is more than dance. Something I learned in the process of teaching my students was, if I want to nurture young artists who perform with pride, dignity, and independence, I have to give them the resources to live that way. So beyond teaching technique and movement, a crucial aspect of our work has been to empower young gay men with the skills and opportunities needed to thrive. This comes in the form of a livable wage and added performance fees, which the dancers have used to pay for their own living spaces, support their families, pursue higher education, and invest in their own small entrepreneurial endeavors. It has manifested in learning skills surrounding the dance, such as dressing people into costume, embroidering gold thread, which you see right here, and designing jewelry, as well as skills beyond the dance, such as learning English so that they have the capacity to research, access global voices and ideas, and represent themselves on their own terms on the international stage. Truly, I am committed to nurture. No more power.
Hello, hello.
Truly, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Truly, I am committed to nurturing the next generation of leaders who will continue the work of collecting and putting all the pieces shattered by war and conflict back together. And beyond this, leaders who will create things that our ancestors will be proud of and that the children of the future will uphold and uplift with love and pride. Perhaps I see myself in these young men who, in small and big ways, show up with love and bravery, and I have worked to transform and enlighten them with one new dish, article, and film at a time. For many of them, being in the company is the first time they have a passport and fly to a different country. And one of my favorite moments was after a performance at Documenta in Germany, where on our way back to the airport, just ever so casually, I heard my students say "Danke" to the ticket agent. My point is that no one in the company stays the same, including myself, who is now more and more, in order to better serve my students' tradition and world, I am now evolving into a producer as well. Instead of looking and saying, how do I make you the best dancer possible, I now ask, how do I help you become the fullest, highest, most beautiful manifestation of art, knowledge, prosperity, love, and life that you are meant to be? So these are my students, Jamran and Rexma. You saw them dancing in the earlier videos, embroidering gold thread under my direction. And so, I don't have this skill, however, my eye is very sharp. So I'm really guiding them much so in this process as a creative director, and experimenting with different materials, different techniques, and different patterns. So these are two of my students, Sonia and Jamran, teaching young men who came to visit from Taiwan. So not only are they learning how to dance, but they're learning how to teach, and they're learning how to choreograph. And in the process of forming community with them amongst themselves, they are also forming community with LGBTQ people all over the world as well. And this is us at the Simbo Breakok Half Marathon. We went to run a 5K together, and so beyond learning dance and learning movement, it's the company is very much so about building community and building leaders, from the inside out, and giving them as many new experiences, as much new exposure to people as possible. And that's our dog, and we love him and take care of him. His name is Dulce. This is my student Soparat, who you heard him singing in many of the videos before, and in one of the videos he danced to the K-pop piece, and you heard him singing in Korean as well. So I'm currently producing Soparat to become a singer that no one can deny in Cambodia and internationally as well. And so you can see here everything from the clothes that he wears, the makeup to the hair, to to the photographers that we work with. I'm really the one producing all of these things. These are young talents who acted in Soparat's music video, and they're wearing clothes that I collaborated with local fashion designers to make. And so you can see the use of Khmer materials and patterns, but then the cut is something very contemporary. And this young man here on the far right is also one of my dance students. And I want to just shout out to Wong Joyce, who's out there in the audience. Thank you, Wong Joyce, because she was the acting coach for this music video. So I'm going to show you a music video now. And it's actually a song that uses a melody that's beloved in Cambodia, Thailand, and Laos. And what happened was I worked with a composer to rearrange the melody. And I also invited my friend in Los Angeles to improvise some guitar based on kind of the mood and feeling that I was going for. And then the young people that you see in the music video are really just young people that I saw in the streets or were friends of friends that I felt something from them. So, but I just want to say that I don't know if you've noticed, but the video quality hasn't been so great. So the color is very muted and everything seems a little blurry. And I think that's because actually of the technology in this room. So just use your imagination to imagine it in its fullest, most vibrant, vivid form. Okay. On this night, the city sleeps. I'm out walking, thinking of your touch. Honey brown skin, I need your love. Oh, once I want. Where are you now? Without you, I'm adrift and night.
heart stands for you, calling. Stay close, don't go. Please hold me now. I'm bound, just want your warm, sweet love. Sunshine likes a blur and blinded by lonely eyes. Soft tears I cry when fall and hide in rivers now.
So I also want to thank my brother Vitu, who also was really instrumental in helping us to, who was really helpful on set. But Vitu just relocated to Seattle from Cambodia, so definitely someone to keep an eye out for here. In the 8 years of our journey, Prumsodun Ok NATYARASA has exemplified the power of being local in character and global in impact. Our message of fearless love, selfless service, and compassionate courage has reached audiences worldwide through performances, coverage on major news platforms, social media, and word of mouth. We are consistently surprised by nice messages from someone in some corner of the world, from young and old alike. Dancing and singing in our humble living room in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, we create a space for young gay men in a tradition commonly understood as a female art form, in an artistic heritage seen as the highest expression of national culture and identity. And therefore, we create space for LGBTQ people in the highest image of Khmer culture and society. Carrying on the creations of our ancestors, while realizing those of our own times and experiences, we fight two legacies of erasure. First, we fight the unfathomable violence initiated by the Khmer Rouge, which saw the deaths of an estimated 90% of Cambodia's artists. Secondly, we fight the erasure of gay history, life, and power in a world where LGBTQ people are misunderstood, stigmatized, beaten, burned, thrown off buildings, and systematically oppressed and rendered invisible through harmful laws and institutions. We are showing Cambodia and the world that young gay men can take care of themselves and their families, that they can have healthy, meaningful lives integrated with their communities. We are showing that being gay is not contrary to tradition, that being gay is not contrary to nature. And even within the gay community itself, we are showing that it is possible to be gay without succumbing to the racism, classism, misogyny, materialism, and consumerism that too often riddles mainstream American gay culture, which has spread all over the world. And, in fact, we are showing that LGBTQ people are rich in history, culture, expression, and possibility. For 8 years, Prumsodun Ok NATYARASA has pioneered dance and art at the intersection and forefront of tradition, education, economic empowerment, leadership development, and human dignity. Like a flower growing through the cracks, like a lotus growing from the mud, like many refugees and immigrants and those in post-war communities all over the world, we have risen in an environment lacking support for, investment in, and strategy regarding the arts, where the guiding voices of mentors, experts, and champions are needed, and where both national and international institutions and entities have shown apathy. In this fragile, insecure, and precarious situation, no one knows how long we can continue our good fight. What will happen when the resources run dry, or when the world turns a blind eye? And I, for one, have lately come to feel the weight of leadership and the social expectations, loneliness, overwork, and risk of burnout it often brings. At the very least, no matter what happens, I can say with pride and confidence that Prumsodun Ok NATYARASA has marked a place in time and space and history for LGBTQ people and for Khmer people, so that no one now or in the future can say, were there really gay people back then? And while we have healthy bodies and breath, as well as the support of our global community, we will continue to dance for those who cannot dance. Like a lighthouse on a dark and stormy night, we will serve as a beacon of guidance, hope, and refuge for those who need us most, even when we can't see them. I want to thank you all for bearing witness to our journeys, for being a part of our journey, as we continue to write our story of love, beauty, courage, offering, and transcendence through the magical tradition of Khmer classical dance. Thank you. In the University of Washington for allowing me the chance to share my journey, but then also to share these young men who are really represent the next generation and the future of our dance tradition. Thank you.
Okay, so now we are opening it up for the Q&A. If you'd like to, you can come make your way down to the mics, but I can also bring it to you.
Well, can we have the lights in the audience?
I'll also start with a question. Yeah, so maybe you can just share with us one of your favorite memories from the early days when you moved to Cambodia, when this first started, if there's any moments that stand out that really pushed you to move forward.
You know, when I relocated to Cambodia in 2015, there was just so much construction happening, and then you'd see these big plots of land that are fenced off with like these signs, you know, with these buildings that haven't been built, you know, and in that construction there was just so much movement, and it really felt like a place where like the wild, wild west, you know, and the feeling of that like anything could happen, you know, and I think that as an artist, it's a really, really exciting feeling, you know, and it's something that I realized like here in the States, where I grew up and where I developed my practice and my voice as an artist, you know, our systems, our institutions are so heavy and established that it's hard for young people to really carve a space that's their own, you know, and to succeed here, you often have to somehow fit yourself into that system, and you have to play that game, you know. Whereas in Cambodia, there's so much infrastructure that's lacking, you know, so many systems that are undeveloped, and there are so many needs, you know. We don't have proper libraries, proper theaters, proper museums, but then those needs actually become opportunities, you know. And so I think when I first went there in 2015, I was just really inspired by this energy that you could feel from the ground up, this energy that you felt in the streets, this energy that you just felt from these young people who you know, were a part of this majority of more than 50% of the country was 35 years old and under, you know. And I'm constantly looking at these young people and like, how did you become who you are? You know, you're like amazing, you know, and you have so much potential and promise, you know. And even on the way here with my friends, my friend Eric shared that Cambodia's projected GDP is ranked second in the world for the next 5 years, you know. So that's just giving you the sense of possibility that's just in the air that I didn't feel here, and I think what I really value about Cambodia is that sense of space, and the sense that things can grow organically, things can grow through the cracks, things can grow through the land, things can grow everywhere, and I think that that's something absolutely essential to artistic practice, that messiness of society and life that creates that vibrance that in America we talk so much about vibrance in our community, cultural vibrance in our community. But when we have to think about making that, we have to ask, like, well, why do some places naturally have it already? So I think the early days is, that was my favorite thing, just that feeling of like anything is possible. I can take more questions if anyone has.
Hi there. First of all, my deepest gratitude to you and the work that you've done. I'm sorry I'm getting teary. This means so much to me to be able to see and witness. My first question is, how did the collaboration with the Japanese community come to be? And I'm sorry to ask you to repeat this, but you said that a tradition that hasn't occurred in like 1,000 years happened in your own home, and I was just I was wondering what that was. Yeah.
So thank you for being here. So actually, I do a lot of research into Japanese literature, and specifically I'm interested in Shingon Buddhism, which is Tantric Buddhism or Vajrayana Buddhism. And the reason why I'm interested in this tradition of Buddhism is that it's the form of Buddhism that was practiced during the Angkor era, and that school or that vehicle no longer exists in Cambodia, although the practices and the mindset is still very much so embedded in our spiritual and social practices. So I read a lot of Japanese mythology and literature that even Japanese people don't read. And one day I read a translation of the Kojiki, which is the oldest imperial Japanese chronicles. And in the Kojiki, there's a story of Toyotama Hime and Yamasachi Hiko, who are the grandparents of Emperor Jimmu, who is Japan's legendary first emperor. So when I was reading this story, I was like, oh my God, this story is just like Prithao Ning Niet. It might as well be the same as Prithao Ning Niet, which is the oldest, it's the oldest origin story of Cambodia, and it's a story in which a prince descends down into the bottom of the ocean to marry a dragon princess, and thus begins the imperial lineage. So so I read the story, then I read the footnote, and the scholar said that story was likely brought to Japan by way of Southeast Asia, right? And so, I think we have a very colonial mindset where we like to project that the past was not a global era. Actually, our ancestors have been moving around the world for thousands and thousands of years, right? And so A Deepest Blue is not retelling the story of Prithao Ning Niet or Toyotama Hime Yamasachi Hiko, but rather it's using that story as a starting point to imagine a descent into the ocean. And the story is that I commit suicide in the ocean, and in the process, I encounter these magnificent marine creatures, I encounter pollution, I encounter the lost ghosts of traders, slaves, and warriors. And then what happens when I encounter the Dragon Mother, who's all at once this great ancestor, but then also at the same time, great ancestor and master of this oceanic domain, but then at the same time, we as her children, as her descendants, are the ones destroying that domain, you know. And so what would she say to us? What does justice look like, you know? And she really represents the force to release the rage and fury of nature, I guess, you know. And I think, for me, I think nature is always in control and in balance, but then what happens when nature loses control, and in this case, manifested emotionally by this dragon mother. In the process of developing A Deepest Blue, I was listening to Japanese traditional music, and then I came upon this tradition called gagaku. And gagaku is it's an imperial Japanese music tradition that's more than 1,000 years old, that has roots in China, in Korea, in Mongolia, and in Southeast Asia as well. And so in the process of reading more about gagaku, I learned that there's a melody called funan in their repertoire today, and funan is the oldest Chinese name for Cambodia, right? And so, you know, and in reading that, you know, we learned that there were some melodies called Rinyu melodies, or the Chinese name is Linyi melodies. And the scholars say that actually those are not Rinyu or Linyi melodies, which is the name for Champa, but they were actually melodies from Funan or Khmer melodies. And even then, you know, there was a lot of back and forth between the courts of Cambodia and Champa. But so, you know, this melody that's been preserved in Japan, you know, no one knows that, you know, that this is what exactly it sounded like in ancient Cambodia, you know, or if it was just like a style or a mode that was composed in China, because what happened in ancient China was they were receiving offerings of dancers and musicians from Cambodia, and there was even a department of Funanese or Khmer music in the Chinese court. And there was a lot of, because it was an empire, just like America, there's a lot of like fusing and experimentation and interpretation, you know. So we don't know where that melody Funan, you know, how original it is to Cambodia, or if it was composed in China or in Japan. But the fact that this melody called Funan, which, you know, before that in Cambodia no one had ever heard of, is all of a sudden, you know, more than 1,000 years later, back in Cambodia, in this ritual, used to pay respect to the spirits of the teachers. You know, it's something very historic, you know, and for me it was beautiful to think about, like, something that initially caught me, so just by nature of it was just visceral and powerful, and on an aesthetic level actually had deeper roots of why that connection is there, you know. And so A Deepest Blue will bring together Khmer classical dance, gagaku, and then also Japanese Buddhist drumming and chanting from specifically from the Shingon sect, as well as animation as well. So that's how all of those things are coming together.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Hi, Prom. I want to say thank you for coming out to Seattle. I have a question on how you were able to, like, stretch your embodiment of becoming a leader, creative director, producer after going towards, like, just your artistry, and, like, what were the, I would say, like, things that came up that maybe have, like, hindered your growth. I know, like, towards the end you were talking about like burnout, lack of community, or just, like, being lonely. How have you continued to grow as this embodiment of, like, leadership and a pioneer?
I think that when I make work, I always ask myself 3 questions. How is this dance or this work of art pushing me personally? How is it pushing my discipline, my tradition? And then how is it pushing the world? You know, so for me, the work needs to somehow always touch that three-pronged thing. And so certainly, like for me, like when I make, I don't make because I want to make. I make because I need to make. You know, I'm different from many people in Cambodia who call themselves artists, but you ask like, what are they making? And you know, nothing. You know, or they only make something when they have money. You know, and that's very different from the way that I live and work. And I think that because I'm really inspired by Buddhist philosophy, and specifically the image of the Bodhisattva, who are beings who, although they have the ability to attain nirvana, choose to stay on earth in order to inspire the transcendence of others. You know, and so for me, that kind of Buddhist activism, I guess, that sense of service, that sense of offering, is something that's really ingrained in my practice and mode of thinking. And it may be from the fact also that I am aware that, you know, I'm inheriting a gift that was nearly destroyed in a genocide. You know, and so I have an extremely great privilege and honor, but also great responsibility to serve it. You know, and so I think, you know, in the act of just asking, what does my tradition need? What do my students need? What does my community need? Those things have just pushed me. You know, I was never trying to be like, I need to be the star in the room. I need to be the most visible person. I was never like that. It's just more always just like, what does this need? What does that need? What do they need? You know, and in that process, you know, just growing. You know. And you know, in terms of things that have hindered me, you know, it's you know, I think it's really interesting because I've had to fight ever since I was young. You know, so people, when they look at me or when they look at my sisters, they think like we come from a dance family, but actually my parents never wanted us to dance, and I had to, even as a 16, 17-year-old, I had to like fight with them every single day in order to dance, you know. And so I myself as a person have this warrior spirit already, you know, and that spirit is like, well, I don't care if you don't see the value of that, I do, you know, and challenge and the ability to challenge people, you know, and the ability to stand my ground, you know. And so today, to be honest, everyone in Cambodia knows who I am, and it's this situation where, you know, for example, I was at this Royal University of Fine Arts for an event, and one of the teachers, she says to me, she's like, my goodness, Prom, I never would have expected that you are the person that you are today. You're like amazing. And she says, you know, like people don't say it, but you know, you're doing a good job. They would never, you know, she uses the word pao, it's just like utter, you know, they would never utter, you know, that you're doing a good job, but you are, you know. And there was a British researcher who came to interview me, and she was like, so what do you think about the elder teachers? And I say, well, you know, like when they see me, they're always cordial, they're always welcoming. Some of them, you know, offer me food and things like that. But you know, I know that even if they don't agree with what I do, they recognize the value of my work as a teacher and as an artist, you know. And so, and she's like, yeah, actually I was interviewing an elder artist, and when I asked about like experimentation or whatever, and I didn't even mention your name, but like he brought up your name, and I could see him like struggling, like how to process you, you know, because on the one hand, you know, like maybe he doesn't agree with like male classical dancers, but on the other hand, like he's recognizing the integrity of the teaching and the artistry, you know. And so being in Cambodia is quite tough sometimes, you know, because Cambodia is a country that's not seen as politically and economically strategic. It's not seen as a player. And then on top of that, you know, the government right now doesn't have a clear and robust arts and cultural strategy. You know, how to use art for cultural diplomacy, how to use art for economic development, how to use art for education. There's nothing like that right now. So internally, there's a lot missing, you know, and then on top of that, the foundations, the embassies that come, I feel like they don't have a real rootedness to the land. You know, these people come for 5 years and then they're gone, you know. So there's no real rootedness, there's no real love, there's no real investment by these entities. And because of that, there's no real connection and change. And so you have this situation, and then you have the situation where, you know, you'll see call for proposals for LGBTQ work in Vietnam and Thailand and Myanmar, and you're just like, okay, well, I'm in Cambodia, and no one in the fucking region or the world is doing what I'm doing, like, you know. And so it's this thing where these presenters and foundations, you know, they have their own art and cultural strategies, but like they have no real connection to the ground. And so for myself, I often feel like, you know, like we're working as an independent arts organization, like we're just like super under the radar and super you know, super like overlooked, you know. And I think one of the things that's frustrating to me is that, you know, if we just had the right people, you know, and if we just had the right resources, you know, we will make this big bang that, you know, no one can imagine, you know, because the vision is there, the grit is there, the quality of the work is there, the history is there, the capacity is there, but what's lacking is that the environment around us hasn't been as visionary, which is expected when you think about people working in institutional contexts, you know, because bureaucracies move slow.
Thank you.
Yeah, I hope that.
I have one more question.
Okay.
Thanks. We have time for one more question. If anyone would else like to ask. Yeah, Bang Pram also speaks Khmer. Naknamian Samnua. No other questions? Okay.
Hello, thank you for being here again today. I was just curious, you mentioned that initial grant kind of being the spark, and I was wondering how the growth went from there for your company. If it was very organic, or if you had to do some recruiting, or if there was hesitancy by members just because of the stigma of being a dancer, like you mentioned. Yeah, curious about that.
Yeah, so since receiving that grant, I moved to Cambodia, and you know, all of a sudden these young men who some of them never even graduated high school were receiving a wage that entry-level college graduates were receiving in Cambodia. You know, and then on top of that, they were being paid more than dancers who were more professional than them. You know, so that's the kind of scale and kind of integrity that I, as an artist, believe in, like supporting other artists. And you know, people have always known who I am in Cambodia. You know, like I'll give you an example. Like many years ago, I went to go pick up a dancer from UCLA. She was doing a residency from Cambodia, and the moment she saw me, she said, "Oh, you're Prom. The first thing I was told to see in the United States was you dancing." right? So people in Cambodia had already known who I was and were already talking about me. And so certainly these, in the age of social media where I'm like uploading videos onto Facebook and things like that, the young men were already kind of following me. And so, initially we started with 10 young men, and they were being given a livable wage during a 3-month audition process. And then from those 3, I chose 5 dancers. And those dancers left for various reasons, like they had to finish high school, or they had to focus on other work. But the company is continually supplied because people follow me through like my TED Talk, or I meet some students that I was at my teacher's academy where I was helping to teach, or they come through one of their friends. And so the company has grown and transformed very organically. And I will say that at this moment, we've come to a very a new stage where my senior students are able to teach the junior students. And so in our space, many forms of learning are happening. You know, there's the teacher to student, but then there's the senior to junior, but then there's also peer-to-peer learning. And right now, actually, they are, the senior students are producing their first producing their first show on their own, fundraising on their own, choreographing on their own, publicizing on their own. So really, we're at a moment where I'm starting to like say, okay, I'm gonna give you everything that you need to have in order to properly take care of this tradition. Yeah, so, and through these years, you know, we've survived through artist grants that I received, that which I use the funding to pay for rehearsal fees, which means their salaries. But then also we generate income through international performances and domestic performances. But now, you know, with the creation of costumes and with the teaching, the students are starting to generate funding for the company that way. So, in the States, because there's such a like model of like non-profit arts funding, you know, I never had to think about that. But once I went to Cambodia, where that was missing, you know, the entrepreneurial kind of growth and mindset in me really had to grow and be strong very quickly, you know. And so that's why, you know, the way that I think and work is like a deity with like 1,000,000 arms, you know, that you would see somewhere at Goa or something. And so certainly the company does that, as well, as you can see with the diversity of the work that we're doing.
Awesome, thank you. That's amazing.
Okay, thank you.
Hello. Thank you all for coming. It's 5:30, so that is the end of the event. I want to say thank you so much to Prom for sharing with us. This was truly special.